Our guest today is Andrew Schwab. He's a frontman and lead singer and lyricist for the Christian metal band Project 86, which has achieved international success as an independent group since its inception in 1996. In addition to a successful music career, Andrew is also an accomplished author of several books and a talented graphic artist. And he's very tall, too. You're taller than me.
I'm cheating. I'm wearing boots.
Okay, all right. His most recent book, The 10 Soldiers, focused on a lost generation of young men who are searching for meaning and purpose. Would you welcome with me Andrew Schwab? Hey, sir, how are you? So, your band is awesome. I really actually enjoy listening to it when I work out, which is rare, but no. But your band is called Project 86. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you guys landed on that name?
Well, the band's been around since the 90s, the late 90s, and back then it was really cool if you were playing alternative music or rock music to have a word with a number in your name.
Okay.
It's not as cool anymore.
Sure.
But we chose the number 86 because it referenced being rejected or separated, and we felt like that was a good double meaning almost, in the sense that we were all Christian artists, Christian musicians, coming together to hopefully play music not just for Christians, but for the greater rock and heavy music community. But there's a risk in that, because maybe when they find out what we believe, they reject us.
Yeah.
It was also meant to be applied to...
People in the metal community would reject you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the idea also that it was always a goal for us to have our own sound, not to be a Christian version of something else that was maybe more popular or more accepted in the general market, per se. So that was a risk as well. So we felt like Project 86 was putting ourselves out there, potentially being rejected.
It's funny because I think about like the 1960s and 70s and the Jesus movement. There were these kind of music people that were coming out of the rock world. They were getting saved through like Calvary Chapel, Vineyard movements and stuff. And they were doing this exact kind of thing, and they just got skewered by the Christian community. You guys now being heavy metal, which is like, a whole nother level of rock, has an angry or, rigid sound to it. A lot of people aren't used to it. A lot of people will criticize you guys, or even heavy metal Christian bands in general, not being Christian enough. I mean, like, what's your response to that?
It's funny when I hear people try to classify the band as being rock or metal or heavy, etc. When we started, we were like one of the heaviest bands, and as we've evolved, we've become a little bit more rock-centric, but there's so many bands that are so much heavier than us. We're considered light almost now. Yeah. But it all depends on who you're comparing, whatever band you're talking about to or whatever sound to. But anytime you play anything that's a little less orthodox or mainstream, you run the risk of being ostracized by a certain audience, etc. And we've always appealed to a certain demographic. A lot of them are guys.
Yeah.
A lot of them are guys who like listening to music when they work out.
Yeah.
Or people who are going through a hard time or a difficulty in their life, a trial. And that seems to be consistent throughout the years in doing this, is the people who are going through difficult times really relate to the music. And so I don't think it's for necessarily everybody. But for the people that connect with it, they connect with it deeply.
It's, and that's the other thing, is you guys have such a great heart behind your music. And I think that's a big part of like what often gets lost. Actually, I think it was a few months ago, we were interviewing Brian Welch from Korn, and he said something similar, like he felt like his music was giving voice to a lot of like kids in particular that, had a rough life and didn't have a way, like it gave them a way to feel angry about it. I mean, I even read the Psalms. I mean, look how angry David is,
Totally.
And you guys are okay with that part of our faith as well, which I think is great. Like one of the things you talk about is like our music may not be positive, but it's honest. Like tell me a little bit about that.
Echoing Brian's sentiments, he's a good friend of mine, by the way. He texts me every now and then, and he's back in Korn now, which I think is such a cool thing, because he left the band, not to divert to talking about Brian, but just echoing that sort of idea and that philosophy. He left the band because it wasn't the right place for him for where he was at in being a new Christian.
Yeah.
And then grew a little bit in his faith and was able to re-enter that, and has had a positive impact, not just on the culture of the Korn fan base, but also within the band, which is really interesting. But to answer your question, the idea of honesty when it comes to art is sort of a misnomer because you're naturally doing something that's creative and therefore up to the interpretation of the individual listening or looking in. But when we reference honesty in the context of the lyrics or the music, it's speaking about emotional honesty in trying to not portray, the Christian experience or the faith experience or the life of someone who has faith as great, perfect, which unfortunately is a lot of the CCM community. That's okay, I think that's appealing to a certain, mentality as well, and
What
there's
does
a place for
CCM
that.
mean, by the way?
Contemporary Christian music.
Oh, okay, cool.
Contemporary Christian music.
I always think
so-
Crystal Cathedral Ministries. It's a hang-up. I've got to... It's a long story. We'll get into that.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
That's funny. When you're trying to be emotionally honest in your music, you're trying to essentially say, hey, I'm going through this thing sometimes, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm doing awesome, and that's okay.
Yes,
and this is
exactly
how I
right.
feel.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean? And then other days, man, I just want to take over the world because I
Yeah.
feel like my life is going the right direction and I have a power greater than me behind me. But to portray the whole of the human experience in the context of faith, that's the goal.
That's awesome, Andrew. Andrew Schwab from Project 86. Check out their music. It's awesome. Before we let you go, tell me about Tin Soldiers real quick.
Thank you guys, by the way, and thanks for having me. Thank you for having me. This is the most recent work, literary work, I put my hands on. It's called The Tin Soldiers. This is an actual workbook. It's geared towards guys, emerging generations of men, as well as, men in general, just who are maybe questioning where they're at in life. Where am I going? What's my purpose? It's meant to sort of break it down and help you to hone in on where you're headed and maybe what God is doing at this specific moment with your life.
Great. The book is called Tin Soldiers. Andrew Schwab, Project 86. Thank you, sir, so much. We
man.
appreciate you and
Pleasure's
love you.
all mine.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
God bless you.
Yeah.